Alright, so looking at quiz 2, most of the people missed number 1 and 2 because they did not graph. They gave me a table. Again, a table is when you take your x and y and you have a bunch of numbers. That is a table. A rule is when you have y equals something. That is a rule. A graph is a graph, which means you have to actually plot points. 0, -3 means go down 3. 1, 1 means go over 1, up 1. 2, 3 means go over 2, up 3. 3, 4 means go over 3, up 4. I wouldn't call whether it was linear or not from here because for the most part, as we know, our graphs are imperfect. We really don't know how straight these lines are. You're supposed to do linear versus nonlinear by just looking here. From -3 to 1 is +4. From 1 to 3 is +2. Once I see two different numbers, I know that this is nonlinear. As I told you before, this test is going to take one question and compound 2 or 3 questions in it. So make sure you are ready to answer everything. Before you walk away from the question, go back and make sure you are looking at it, or just practice these things enough to where you notice that there's more than one thing being asked a lot of times. Alright. Again, number 2 just wanted a graph. 0, 5 is here, means don't go left or right, but do go up 5. 1, 2 means go over 1, up 2. 2, -1 means over 2, down 1. 3, -4 means go over 3, down 4. Again, whether you connect these lines or not, or connected or not, I'm not really worried about. Just make sure your points are in the proper spots. That's why we had those Cartesian points. And then again, linear versus nonlinear, I don't want to get it from the graph. This is a test you're talking about. So again, assume that the person who made the test has a trick up their sleeve and do the thing the right way. 5 to 2 is down 3. 2 to -1 is down 3. -1 to 4 is down 3. Again, if you don't know that, it's because you simply do second minus first. 2 minus 5. -1 minus 2. -4 minus -1. But you have to practice that in order to get there, so make sure you do that so you know what's going on. But again, because that's all the same, that is a linear graph. I now have a graph. I'm now told whether it was linear or nonlinear, and that was all I need. So again, make sure you are ready to answer all that stuff at once. Number 2, read the question. The profit on the number of pins the store sells is represented by the rule. Here, what does a table of values look like? All you have to do is give me some points. But again, it has to be a reasonable set of points. What I said in this problem on your notes is that you should not start with a negative because you can't sell a negative number of pins. Start from the lowest. The lowest number of pins you can sell is 0. And then from there you just do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so when doing this, we will go ahead and do 2 parentheses 0 minus 3, which of course is -3. Then we'll just go back, turn our 0 into a 1, which gives me a -1. Again, you're just taking this number and plugging it in, or you can do it in your head. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. 6 minus 3 is 3. 8 minus 3 is 5. That is all you need. The only thing is you will probably be asked to go ahead and graph this thing, which means that you would actually have the 0, -3, the 1, -1, the 2, 1, the 3, 3, and the 4, 5. But like I said, just be ready for that. Make sure you read the question. Make sure you pay attention. Again, this is a test. The people who are giving the test are trying to trick you. As long as you understand they're trying to trick you, you won't just walk in there and just answer something and walk away like everything's great. You will reread your answer to make sure that everything is there because you understand they are trying to make you miss the question. I am the only person in there who's trying to not make you miss the question. Unfortunately, most of you don't follow my advice as much as you should, so we'll talk about that. Anyway, continuous means that the flow is constant. It means that the change goes from here and it slowly works its way up to here and slowly works its way up to here. Discrete or non-continuous means that it goes from here, it jumps over a bunch to here, it jumps over a bunch to here. Distance, when you run, does not go from 1 mile to 2 miles to 3 miles. It goes 0 miles and 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and you slowly work your way away from something that is continuous. The number of days is not continuous because that goes from 0 days to 1 day to 2 days to 3 days and so on. There is no 0.1, there is no 0.5, there is no 1.7, no 2.6, no 3 point anything. There's no continuous flow of information. It just kind of flips over from 0 to 1. Then it flips from 0 to 2, or sorry, from 1 to 2, then from 2 to 3. Height of a giraffe, again, height of anything. It doesn't stand here and then you see it a week later and it's this tall, then you see it a week later and it's this tall. It slowly grows and makes whatever point it's going to make, which means height should be continuous. Number of burgers sold by a restaurant does not go 0 to 0.1. It goes from 0 burgers to 1 burger to 2 burgers to 3 burgers. This is jumping over a lot of stuff. Those are both discrete, okay? Those are not continuous because the flow of information is not a smooth transition from every single number to every single number. And I know I say 0 to 0.1 to 0.2, but it actually goes from 0 to 0.000001 to 0.00002 to 0.00, and I'm talking millions of zeros. Small, slow transitions is what makes it continuous. If you cannot have a decimal version of that value, then that means that it is not continuous. Number of people will never be continuous because you cannot see 1.7 people in a building or in a room. 1.7 people in a room means that there's 70% of someone walking around, which I don't think can ever really happen. Number 5, make sure you read, make sure you understand what it's asking for. It says you plan to decorate t-shirts to sell at a crafts fair. The decorations cost $67.50. T-shirts cost $8.50 each. There's a key word here you should be looking at. Write an equation for a function expressing the cost C of x in terms of t-shirts decorated. So what they want is C of x equals, because again they want a function expressing the cost in terms of number of shirts decorated. This is not a reasonable domain question. This is not a reasonable range question. If it was, then it would say what is the reasonable domain, reasonable range. This wants a formula, which means all you have to do is put your $67.50, which doesn't get a variable because it's just that's the cost of all the shirts, and then $8.50 each means that x gets attached to that. That's all it's asking for. Again, this question is definitely within your range, but you have to practice to make sure you don't miss it. In all honesty, you want to get to the point where you definitely have the easy questions out of the way. Number 5 should definitely be a question that you do not miss. Number 6 should definitely be a question that you do not miss. The main thing people messed up on 6 was in the order. I want you to imagine, and this has nothing to do with this answer, but I want you to imagine I'm giving you the domain of 1,000 numbers. I have an 8, I have a negative 1,000, or a negative 100, a 6, a 14, a negative 18, and all kinds of thousands of numbers. If I was to ask you if the number 3 was in this list of 1,000 numbers, and it's out of order, the only way you could check to see if 3 is in there is to check every single digit until you bump into a 3. And there's a much easier way to do this if there were 1,000 numbers in there, and that would be to put these numbers in order. So negative 10, and then it went 6, and then it went 18, and then it went 24, etc. If they're in order and I ask you if a 3 is in there, then you look where 3 would be. You notice it's not there, and your answer would be no. You do not need to check every number. You check that range of where that number should be. And that is why when you do domain and range, you need to put them in order. Otherwise, you're going to miss the whole thing. Other than that, domain represents x. Put your brace down. Again, put them in order. The smallest x is negative 3, 1, 2, and 4. Do not give me the input-output thing like what you did. I need domain and range. This is not a mapping. This is a domain and range question. So if you give me that mapping, the thing with the bubbles and all the numbers, you're going to miss that question. I need domain and range with the braces, just like the problem that you had me answer 800 times in class. Here, negative 4. There, 5. Next, do not need duplicates. And 8. That's it. Domain is negative 3, 1, 2, 4. Range is negative 4, 5, 8. That's it. Alright. Number 7. Very frustrating for me when I graded it. It just wants to know what f of 6 is. What that tells me is that some of you don't pay attention and study your notes. F of 6 is function notation. It is simply asking you to put 6 or negative 6 in for x. That means negative 4 parentheses negative 6 plus 7. I don't need you to show me all the work. I don't need you to do this in your head. I need you to get the answer because we're out of chapter 1, which means just type it in the way that I showed it to you, getting the simple answer of 31. Trust me when I tell you, you shouldn't miss number 7 either. Again, that question should not be missed if you're doing what you're supposed to do in terms of studying and preparing. Honestly, the only questions you should have an issue with might be the rules, writer rule stuff, but I mean, even that, after you practice enough time, should be okay. Number 8 should honestly be a question you don't miss as long as you study. Find the range, which means it wants all the y's, for the given domain, which represents all your x's. These are all x values, which means that all you have to do is take this number and type it in the right way. Do not put -3 squared, because the squared is not part of what you're putting in. When I've been teaching you to do this stuff, I said put the number in, close it, and then rewrite the rest, which means you should be putting -3 close squared plus 1, which is 10, not -8. And so one of your answers is 10, then 0 squared plus 1, which is 1, and then 2 squared plus 1, which is 5, and then 4 squared plus 1, which is 17. Now here's what you might be saying: Mr. Bradley, I wrote the numbers out of order. You said it was okay, but then the other one you marked wrong. You know what? This has enough of work in it that if you don't put it in order, as long as you've got the right answers, I'll let it go. Now you should put them in order if possible, but I really don't care at that point, as long as you remember to do that. If you remember to put the domain and range in order on the other one, and you do this one that way, I have no issue. But in all honesty, it should be 1, 5, 10, 17. But I am only looking to make sure the numbers are there. Just make sure you know how to get those numbers there. Again, study this information and be ready for it. I don't think you should miss that, because you saw how easy that was to do. Now number 9 is tough. At least this portion of it is tough. But this is the only tough portion of it if you're a studier. This is the question where we had to write r equals, and then we had to say 275 for the first mile, so 2.75, which only happens once, plus 115 for each additional, so 115 times m. And it's not m though, because the first mile is free, and so what you're supposed to do is do m minus 1. But that is not your formula. That is not your function. Your function is r equals 275 plus 1.15 m minus 1.15, which is still not your function, because you now have two constants that can be put together. So your function is whatever 2.75 minus 1.15 is, which is 1.6. And that is it. This is the function I am looking for. And yes, I'm being picky, but I mean, we worked on that. That was on your homework. I think I at least gave you 3 of those, or 2 or 3 of those things to do. If you didn't practice it, that's on you, but I know that I told you to practice it. I know that I put everything you needed on that homework. You have to start taking advantage of that stuff. 11-mile taxi ride. Again, if you didn't need this to get the answer for that part. Now, yes, you should be able to plug 11 in here, 1.6 plus 1.15 times 11 to get the answer of 1425, because I have the proper formula. But you don't even need the proper formula. If you know you're not good at this formula, just use your common sense. That's really all it comes down to. That's all math really wants you to do. This is not saying show me the algebra. It's saying what is the cost of an 11-mile taxi ride, which means go back to your rules. It says the first mile is 275, and that's the first mile. We are not going to multiply 11 by 115, because that would be 11 miles. That's additional, but that's not 11 additional miles. It is 10 additional miles, which means it should be 275, which is for the first mile, plus 10 times 115 for the rest of that. And notice that I still get, just using the common sense version of this math, 1425. So even if you know the formula, plug it in, great. If you're not good at making the formula, just use your common sense. You got charged 275 for the first mile. You got charged 115 for 10 more miles, and your answer is 1425. Again, you can answer that without using that formula. I just need to make sure you know how to figure out the cost so you don't get cheated when you get out of school and become an adult. Last thing is independent versus dependent. This is something where you have to honestly be able to think, or you could just study it and understand. Independent drives everything. Nobody gets into a cab and says, here's $50, drive. They get in the cab, they give a destination. You don't know how much it costs until you know how far you go. And so your miles is the independent part. Your miles is what tells you what the cost or the rate is, whatever that word is, rate. And so what you can say is that your rate depends on the number of miles. The miles does not depend on the number or the rate of the rate of the drive, or the rate of the ride itself. Your rate, how much it costs, depends on how far you drive, which is why miles is independent, rate is dependent. You can study that, you can learn that. I don't think you should miss this one. I don't think you should miss that one. Again, you might have missed them on the quiz, but I don't think you should miss those again. Number 10 is also another one that you should not miss now that you understand the difference. Talks about you and your brother selling crafts at the park. You earn this much on each craft. They give us a function here. Says we have enough supplies for 300 things. They want a reasonable domain. Remember, the lowest number and highest number is what they're looking for. A domain, that's what you can do. Domain deals with your crafts. Lowest number of crafts we can sell is 0. Have to use C for crafts. The highest number of crafts we can sell is 300. Again, this was on your homework. If you studied it, if you practiced it, great. If you didn't know when to use it because you really didn't practice it. But again, there is a difference between homework and studying. Your range is your profit. So what is your profit range going to be? Well, if I sell 0 crafts, I should have 0 money. Be sure you put P of C because, of course, that's that. Or you could just use P there. But again, you definitely can't put a C there. And in terms of your high range of profit, you need to take the high number of domain and multiply it into the formula and see what happens if you sold 300 crafts, which means that the highest you could go is 60. That is all it takes. In the end, again, I don't even think you should miss 10. I think that should be an easy question, but again, that is up to you. You have to make sure you know that. Now, in terms of function, remember that a function is anything that passes the vertical line test, which means this is a function. It means this is a function. It means that is a function. Anything that does not cross under itself or have a part of itself under it, all those are functions. You have V's, you have all kinds of weird shapes that you could have that are functions. Anything there would have worked, and a lot of you got that right. 12, I don't think so many got right, because, or people got it right, but there are a lot more people that missed 12, or more people that missed 12 than missed 11 because they don't understand what a function is not. A function is not something that folds under itself. As soon as that folds under, and you can find one vertical line that crosses more than once, that is not a function. So a sideways U fails. A sideways V fails. Anything where it's going to cross under itself is going to fail. Now, you're not going to sketch a graph on this. You're actually going to just go ahead and pick the graphs that are functions, but you just have to make sure you know what you're doing. Tell whether a function is linear or nonlinear, then write a rule. Again, this is our favorite thing. It was from the first chapter because I wanted to make sure that you saw it again. This is going down 3. 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 Because we've been through it enough times, I'm not going to show that part. Remember, it's second minus first, but I do know that it's a first check, which means I can use y equals mx plus b, which means that I will use the first point, plugging in y equals m, again, is negative 3, not 3, which is what a lot of you put, and 1 plus b. That turns into negative 3 plus b, which when you add 3 gives you 7. Again, some of you missed half your points because you stopped there. You don't stop there. Your rule is always a y equals. So y equals negative 3x plus 7. That is the rule that you should have ended up with. Again, I had a lot of people who put the negative 3 here and then a regular 3 there, and they ended up with like a negative 1 or plus 1 or something. Check the rule. Take the 1, plug it in. Those of you who got y equals 3x plus 1, that's great. It does work for this because when you do your 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 makes 4. Check this one. Remember, I check more than one. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 1 is not 1. That tells you that you messed up. You don't have to check 19 different things, but if two numbers match, if two ordered pairs match, then you know you probably got it right. But a lot of you don't even go so far as to check it because you're in a rush. But here's what you don't realize. You rush through it, you don't check it, and then you get an F. Which one's more important? I would take my time, make sure it was right, and just plug in a couple numbers. And you don't even need to plug them in. Some of those you can actually just check on your own mentally. I'm sorry, I forgot something. See? There we go. This is linear. But again, I know this because when I asked the question, or when I read the question here, I saw it there. Good news for you is I am going to have that on your test where I'm going to put the words linear, nonlinear to make sure you answer them and try to make it so you don't overlook things like I almost did there. This is going up 3, up 5, up 7, up 9. Pardon the speed, but we're at 20 minutes now and I'm trying not to waste your whole day. That means it is not linear. This is then plus 2, plus 2, plus 2. That does not mean m equals 2. It's only m equals 2 if it was up here. Nonlinear, this just tells me that it is a x squared graph here, and that I need a x squared, y table. Again, the only time I use y equals mx plus b is when the first check matches. Now what you're going to do is put 1, 6, 2, 9, 3, 14, 4, 21, 5, 30, and then plug in your x squared. Again, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25. And the last thing I do is say, how do I get from x squared to y? And after observing this for a little bit, you should recognize that all we are doing is adding 5. That does not mean 5x squared. Please stop doing that. The rule is always a y equals. Again, if the rule is to add 5, then you put whatever your base is, which is x squared plus 5. That would be your rule. Again, for those of you who like to put 5x squared, just go ahead and plug in that number. 5 times 1 squared. That's why I teach you to use the calculators, and you see you're already wrong. Like it came and be close, because just checking that number says it doesn't work and tells you to just make an adjustment to it. Again, just a small moment to check your work would put you on track, so you might want to make sure you do that. 15 and the rest of these are questions that are mastery checks, and I don't think you should have missed them, because these are the ones that when I first started doing it, I said make sure you ask about them, so you don't get them right for homework, which is what people think is just the perfect thing, which is the 5% part of your grade, and then you mess up on the quiz, which is the 35% part of your grade. My advice is that you start acting like I actually know what I'm talking about, not just like I'm talking to be mean or anything like that. I'm trying to help you succeed, but I know that you're not going to take me seriously, and so I have to say it with a little bit of grit, because I know you don't believe me when I say it the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, or about the 10th time, but eventually you start to make that difference. The reason most of you miss this is because you saw the 6, you figured m was 6, but again, you did not look at this as, maybe this person's trying to trick me. Let's check the x side, which is going up 2, up 2, up 2, which means that all these are actually slopes of 3, which means it cannot be A, cannot be B. Here's the thing that I would have told you, which is why I said make sure you ask me if you know. If it's a multiple choice question, you don't even have to do all of that work. All you honestly have to do is take your x and plug it in. 6 times 5 is 30, plus 4 is not 20. Can't work. 6 times 5 is 30, plus 5 makes 35. Doesn't work. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 4 makes 19. Doesn't work. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 5 is 20. That's the only one that works. It's the only one that it could possibly be. It is a multiple choice question with a table, which means all you honestly have to do is take your x value, plug it in, and see if it matches. Alright? Please do that. Please make that up as soon as you can. I need you to be able to get that right. 16 will be a multiple choice question, but I don't think you should need multiple choice because it's pretty easy to do. You have your total. You have the cost of the pizza. That means that if you subtract the total and the cost of pizza, $21.75 minus $15.75, then you find out that this is the cost of all of the drinks. Now all you have to do is say, how many drinks did I buy? 5 large drinks. So you take 6, you divide it by 5, and you get the price of $120. Again, fix that ASAP. You can get it right. Just make sure you come up at some point. I can do that on my computer. I can just pull it up, have you answer it, and go from there. It's not hard for me to give you those points. So whenever you get the chance next week sometime and you can focus on that, please do it. This one is calculator work. Evaluate a plus mn for a equals 13, m equals 11, n equals 6. That just means do what I've taught you to do, which is turn every letter into a number using parentheses. M is 11, n is 6. And just type it in, parentheses 13 plus parentheses 11 parentheses 6, close. You end up with 79. And then 19 is the one that, again, if you came up, I talked you through it. Put everything that you are paying together. Your phone is $14.60. I'm not going to read it because you've already seen it. You got to repay your parents $80. That means these are both things you have to spend, which means the first thing you should do is take those two numbers, and add them together to find out how much you owe. 1460 plus 80 gives me a number of 1540. If you're going to deposit that much each week and it's the same amount each week, that means that you now must divide by 35 and you get the answer of 44 weeks. But again, even that question is multiple choice, so you kind of get a chance to do that. But just, again, keep in mind, especially on these questions, whenever I'm telling you to make sure you ask about it, I'm not telling you to make sure you ask about it because I want to feel like a genius. I'm telling you to ask about it because I know there's an element to that question that I can make a lot easier for you that I won't do in the video. So you have to kind of do some secondary research, some secondary work, and you'll find out that I actually do know how to make these questions easier. But I can't do that in the video because you need to kind of learn things on your own or seek the information on your own. But again, just make sure you study all this stuff. Be ready for the test when it pops up. And that would be it.